lazy can of sugar-free soda. I don't know about you guys, but I absolutely love these bubblies. You guys tried them? Oh my God, they're so good. So good. It blows my mind that you can just drink this pretty much all day and there's no calories in it. Like, how good is that? Anyone that is still drinking like full caloried Coke or soft drink, you're crazy. You're crazy. All right. So here we go. Let's get those questions in. G'day, Levi. What's going on, champion? I hope you're well. Vicky's in the house. Kim says, smoking haircut. Whew. Thanks, Kim. Hey, Nina, I hope you're good. G'day, guys. What's happening? All right, let's get to the first questions. Hey, Sandy, I hope you're good. All right, can I wear a belt in all of my workouts that I'm doing strength training? Or is it only for deadlifts and squats and bench? This is a good question. How many of you guys wear a weightlifting belt or like a resistance belt? I used to think, before I knew better, I used to think that the main purpose of a resistance belt was to support your back. Now, some of the resistance belts have this kind of big padding at the back, and they can definitely do that. But in my opinion, that's a secondary to the main purpose of why you might use a lifting belt for heavier exercises like deadlifts and squats. The reason is because what you want to be able to do is when you're at the bottom of the movement, when you're pushing out of the bottom of the movement, you're going to have to push out, right? And when you push out, there can be that feeling of like your insides coming out, right? It doesn't feel good. So what you want to do is you want to have something that's on the other side of that push to keep you tight and keep you what's called bracing, to support you, right? So would you need to wear a resistance belt while you're doing a cable row on a machine or doing some side raises or doing some pull downs or doing some bicep curls? No, you would not need to do that, okay? So if you're roaming around the gym wearing a resistance belt, you do not need to be doing that, okay? Good question. They are dollars. G'day, Caroline. How are you, mate? Guys, if you have any questions, you need to whack them in the comments and I can answer them for you. How much salt affects my weight gain and loss? Okay, so this is a good question. So the short answer is salt can affect your weight gain and loss, but a specific type of weight, okay? Salt causes what's called an osmotic gradient. All that basically means is if on one side of the system, let's say, it's salty and the other side it's not, the body will pull water to the salty side to try to dilute it to make the whole body even. Hopefully that's simple enough to understand. So when that happens, what can happen is you can retain water, right? So if you have a high salt diet, one of the reasons, the theory about how that can potentially cause blood pressure increases is if there's extra salt in your blood, then the body's going to try to retain water to dilute that and bring it back to its normal level. Does that make sense? The salt is not causing you to gain fat. The salt is causing you to retain water. So if you have a highly salty meal and you weigh a kilo extra afterward in the next day or so, that could be the explanation, could be the reason why, but it's weight, water weight, not fat. Make sense? Hopefully it's helpful. Okay, we've got a question coming in from Country Coast Fencing. Best way to stimulate stubborn hamstrings for growth. I love that. So there's a few ways that you can stimulate the hamstrings. One is to get a massive stretch through the pelvis or the hips, okay? We would typically do that with a stiff leg deadlift, whether it's using dumbbells or a barbell, doesn't matter. But what you're doing is you're tilting from your pelvis so that it puts your hamstrings in that really stretched position. Now, what most people do is a curl, a leg curl, right? The leg curl is the simpler variation, and it's the one that people tend to go to. But if you really, after improving your strength and getting new gains through your hamstrings, you really do want to be, in my opinion, doing some sort of a deadlift with either a stiff leg or a slightly bent leg in what we call an RDL or a Romanian deadlifts. These are excellent for building your hamstrings. Okay, so hip hinging movements, which are Romanians and stiff legs, and leg curls. You can do either a lying leg curl or a seated leg curl. They're both pretty good, but I would prioritize a heavier weight RDL or stiff leg deadlift if you're looking to kind of jam up on some new gains. Okay, hopefully that answers the question. All right, guys, do you have any questions? We've got Rebecca Smart saying, as you lose a significant amount of weight, does the amount of protein you eat need to decrease? Good question, Bex. The short answer is no. No. Whether you're in a deficit or whether you are in a, good morning, Kylie, whether you're in a deficit or you're in a surplus or you're in maintenance, right? So let's put that into some numbers. If I'm a woman, generally speaking, maintenance calories, generally speaking, is going to be about 2 to 2,200 calories. In other words, if you eat 2,200 calories, you'll burn 200 to 2,000 calories, you'll maintain weight, right? Roughly. Now, in that circumstance, we suggest in our academy, you're eating upwards of 100 grams of protein per day. Now, if you go through a cutting stage and you're back at, say, 1,600 calories, we would still recommend that your protein is at over 100 grams of protein a day. If you are going through a bulking stage where you're trying to increase muscle mass or you're maintaining, we'd still recommend that your protein's at about 130, 40 grams a day. So it really stays the same. The thing that varies is the amount of carbohydrate that you would have. In a cutting phase, we would typically drop the amount of calories that are coming from carbohydrate. In a bulking phase, we would generally increase them. So what that means is that the protein's staying about the same and the fat is staying roughly the same for most people. And so the variant is the macro of carbohydrate. So if you're cutting, carbohydrate tends to go down. If you're bulking, you get to eat a little bit more carbohydrate. Does that make sense? Hopefully that answers your question back. Yeah. Hello, Craigie. How are you, mate? Guys, if you have any questions, you need to bang them in the comments. I'll answer them. So is it better to cold compress or heat compress an injury? Okay. So generally what's happening is when it, let me give you the background. So when you have an injury, that area gets inflamed, okay? That area gets inflamed. Now, I'm going to tell you straight up, I would divert this question to Troy, okay, because he is a rehab specialist. But generally what's happening is that area is getting inflamed, so it's bringing nutrients and swelling to that area to try to repair it, okay? My understanding of the best practice is actually at the start, you want to kind of cold compress, but doing alternatives can be beneficial because of the fact that then it helps to stimulate blood to actually move through that injury, okay? But I will send this question to Troy and get him to do a post on that inside the group. Okay, can I still really eat whatever I want as long as it fits my macros? So around 10 years ago, there was a movement that come out. You might have heard of it before, and it was basically called, hey, Tez, if it fits your macros, if it fits your macros. If you've heard of that before, if it fits your macros, that was a movement that come out about 10 to 12 years ago. And the idea is this: you can eat whatever you want as long as your protein, your carbs, your calories, and your fat is taken care of. And I do think that this is a pretty good model that still stands tall, right? In other words, can you have chocolate and drink alcohol and still manage your weight? The short answer is yes, you can. Yes, you definitely can. However, is it beneficial? Well, from a micronutrient or a longevity perspective, not necessarily. It's not necessarily. I think that there's a difference between a high quality diet and a low quality diet, even if they are the same amount of calories. As an example, I personally believe that if you had a diet that was loads of chocolate, loads of, I don't know, just processed foods versus the exact same diet stacked up with whole foods, the whole foods is going to be the answer. But that's not to say that there is not room for you to be able to eat some indulgences, and there certainly is. I think trying to include some indulgences in what you actually do makes the whole thing way more doable. You got to ask yourself, are you going to not eat cake for the rest of your life? No. Okay, well then why are you trying to cut it all out for the next 6 months in order to get a result? It just doesn't, it's never made sense to me why we do that. Okay. Hopefully that answers the question. Okay. What is the right way to do a lat pull down or a cable row? Okay. So these two movements are movements which we call pulling movements. Okay. So I'm going to demonstrate to you just with my body and my hands what a cable row and a lat pull down is. A cable row is you can do them on a machine, but it's the one where you put your legs up in front of you and you pull backwards like this. Okay, that's a cable row. A lat pull down is a similar movement, but it goes above the head and pulls down this way. So what's the difference between these two movements? One is vertical. That's the lat pull down. One is horizontal. That's the cable row. In both of these movements, the key position is we're bringing our shoulder blades back. Why are these a good movement? Why do we include them so much in our programming? Here's the reason why. The vast majority of us sit in a car or at a desk like this all day, right? So we're typing on our phones. What's happening here? Our shoulders are rolling forward, our neck is rolling forward, and we're in this crunched position, right? The problem with this is that what's happening here anatomically is that these muscles of the back are becoming really stretched. I want you to think of that like an elastic band that's in the stretch for too long. It eventually just stays there, right? So the muscles at the back become stretched and flaccid, and the muscles at the front become tight because we're in this position, because they're not being lengthened, right? So think about what could be the problems with that. If the front muscles are always tight, the back muscles are always in their stretched, relaxed form. What's the problem with that? The more it happens, the more this tightens, the more this loosens. So this whole posture becomes reinforced. This is the reason why everyone fucking looks like this now, right? So what we're trying to do when we do pulling movements like cable row and lat pull downs, we're trying to get the shoulder blades out of that position and back. We're trying to get that back up and the chest out. This is incredible for your posture. Now, when I was home with my dad at the start of the year, I just noticed that he's a concreter, right? So he's been doing this for years, doing screeding in front of him. The problem with doing that is he's always in the same position. So what I taught him is how to do a cable row properly. And so now he's starting to get his shoulders back and it's improving his posture. So everyone needs to be doing as much pulling movements as we are pushing movements, because so many guys like to push. They like to do chest press, bench press. They like to do shoulder press, right? These are pushing movements that are actually reinforcing the problem. Does this make sense, guys? What we want to be doing is we want to be the opposite of that. We want to be bringing ourselves back into this position. And when we do that, guess what? These ones get stronger, these ones get looser, and it balances the posture out. So that's an introduction to answering the question, how do you do them properly? The simple way when it comes to doing a row movement is you want to drive the movement back with your elbows. Okay, drive the movement back with your elbows. We want to loosen the grip as much as possible, because the tighter you grip it, right? If I'm gripping really, really tightly, you can see here I get contraction in my forearm and my bicep. If I'm gripping it really tightly, I'm getting contraction in my forearm and bicep. But if I release the grip slightly, right, and instead I kind of just hold it like this, what ends up happening? The tension goes out of my forearm and my bicep and now gets transferred to my back and my lats where it's trying to go. So let me show you the difference. If I'm doing a row, I've got two options. I can grip it really, really hard like this with the handles. And look at this. You can see my bicep in my forearm. That's what's taking a lot of the tension, right? If instead I relax this, now I want you to pretend that this is the bar and I relax this and I just grip it just with my fingers like that in what's called a thumbless grip. Now, see how there's not as much tension in my biceps, in my forearms? Now I can use my elbows to push back and drive with my shoulder blades and try to squeeze my shoulder blades together at the back. Now we're working our back and our lats, and that is what we're trying to do in this movement. Now the same goes when we're doing a lat pull down. If you grip really hard on the lat pull down, again, you have a look here, my biceps and my forearms are contracted. If I instead hang my fingers over like this in a thumbless grip, and I instead focus on squeezing down with these muscles here, which we call the lats, squeezing down with the lats. See, there's no tension in my biceps now. Now I get to work the target muscles. So with a vertical pulling movement, we're trying to work the lats. With a horizontal pulling movement, we're trying to work those nice big columns of the back. And this gives you this fantastic physique and a much improved posture. Just going to check our client groups to make sure that that makes sense. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Visual difference is so good. Yep, you're right. Okay, so that's that one. Now I saw a question come through over here. I'm going to go back to it. 2 seconds, guys. Hey, Jace from Chris, is a calorie deficit not going to work if my protein, fat, and carbs are off? Okay, so that's a good question. So Chris, the way to think about this, brother, is that, hey, Pask, how are you, mate? So the sum, so each one of those things, your macros, your fat, your carbs, your protein, has an amount of calories for the amount you eat, right? And so really your total calorie content of the day comes from how much fat, how much carbs, and how much protein you eat, right? So whether you want to look at it like this, plug your calories first, and then, and then 1, 2, 3, carbs, fat, protein, the sum of the calories of these three things add up to that, or that, the calories, breaks down into the sum of these three things. Does that make sense? Nicole says that makes more sense. I think you're probably talking about the exercise example, Nick, but does that make sense? Right? So what we want to be thinking is, to your question, can your carbs and protein and fat be out and you still hit a calorie target? Yes, but if you are saying I'm trying to lose weight, but I'm eating over all of those, well, if you're eating over all of them, then the sum of them is going to be more than the calories that you want. G'day, Glenn. What's going on, brother? Does that make sense? So the sum of the macros in terms of the calories in those adds up to the total calories for the day. Yeah, you with me? Cool. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah. So whether you want to take a macro-based approach and you want to say, I want to eat 150 grams of carbohydrates, 100 grams of protein, 70 grams of fat, you could say that way. Or you could take a calorie-based approach and say, I'm going to target this many calories and I'm just going to hit that much protein. We tend to, in Better Body Academy, we tend to just go, we simplify it. How many calories do you need to lose weight? Right. Now, how much protein do you need to make sure that you eat to make sure that you're losing fat and not muscle? G'day, Ray. How are you, brother? Hopefully that makes sense. Guys, if you have any questions, whether you're here or here, pop them in the comments and I will answer them. Now, Madalena says, I know this question come up before, but I can't really remember the answer. My 16-year-old son and I talked about creatine. How safe is it for him at his age? Great question. So, Mads, the short answer is it's very safe. Okay. Not only is this the most studied supplement on the planet, okay, and everything comes back as safe. Actually, creatine is naturally found in all meat products anyway. So your son is eating creatine anyway. Okay? He's already eating it. It's coming through the diet, right? Through animal-based products. So you know how we have creatine in our body as humans? What we're doing is we are now starting to bump the creatine up through supplementation. Does that make sense? Yeah? Hopefully that makes sense. So the short answer is he's already having it, right? It's not a problem. And Dees is saying, which brand of creatine do you recommend? Good question, Dees. Look, it's not a brand that I would recommend. It's a type that I would recommend. Okay. So like many things, there's many different types of creatine. You want the most basic type. Okay. Let me give you the name of it. The most basic type is creatine monohydrate. Okay. It's very simple. Creatine monohydrate. Okay. That's the type that you want. Now, if you see the word micronized creatine monohydrate, that's a good thing. Micronized basically just means that rather than being sandy-ish in texture like it used to be when we first started taking it in early 2000s, instead it's been chopped up really finely. So it's like dust, right? Would 5 grams be, you could start with 5 grams, yep, and then you could double it over time, but that'd be completely fine. Yep, 100%. So you're looking for micronized creatine monohydrate. Now, if you want to go one level further, okay, not in the type, but in the understanding, there is a label which is a seal of approval in the supplement industry called CreaPure. CreaPure, okay? CreaPure is a labeling that is slapped on to show that it meets the CreaPure quality standards, which is it must be made in Germany by a certain lab, and then the CreaPure company then basically sends the raw product out, and companies rebrand it and label it, but they're still allowed to retain the CreaPure labeling. So I used to buy my creatine from Costco because I could buy it really, really cheap. I bought creatine, micronized creatine monohydrate from Costco, but it wasn't CreaPure. So my understanding would be that that could be sourced from China. So instead, I just try to buy micronized creatine monohydrate that has the CreaPure label. Okay? That is a bloody mouthful of stuff. So hopefully that made any sense. Now I'm going to try to catch up on a couple of questions. What do we got here? Trying to build chest, but doing full body now, hitting 3 times a week, and I feel like I'm dropping the chest. Well, if you're wanting to, then if you have, with all things, if you have a lagging body part, let's say you're a man who wants to bring up his chest. Let's say that you're a woman that wants to bring up her butt. Or let's say you're a man or a woman who wants that kind of wider appearance at the shoulders, which gives you, it really, if you can add some muscle to your shoulders, it gives you an upsize impact on your appearance. Okay? It really does. If you can add a little bit of muscle, particularly in your side shoulders, this will give you the appearance of just being slightly wider at the top, which for most people relative to their waist is going to give them that kind of, this kind of look here, right? So for that reason, if you have a lagging body part that you want to try to work on, feel free to do an extra amount of work on that specific body part while still maintaining the full body plan. Hopefully that makes sense. Hale says, unfortunately, by just concentrating on just the calories and the protein, I didn't lose weight. Now that I'm actually going by macros, I'm starting to lose weight. So Hale's, I'm going to say different horses, different courses. The mechanisms are the same. Hales, if you understood the hierarchy of how calories break down into macros, then macros ascend into calories. It's the same thing. It's kind of like saying A plus B plus C equals D. Therefore, D is the sum of A plus B plus C. So which approach that you decide to take doesn't matter. If you are losing weight now that you are tracking macros, it's because your carbs and your fat were higher than you were accounting for. That's the reason why. So if the calories and protein was not working, it was because you were underestimating the amount of calories that you're eating because your tracking was off because you're underestimating the amount of carbs and fat that you're eating. Like, there's no other way to explain that. That's a really simple, like, that's the reason why. Okay. Which again, I'm not saying that one is better or worse. One is simpler because you have to look at less variables. Okay, so thanks, Edsy, mate. Keep asking questions, and I'm happy to help out. So we're going to go over to our client group and answer some questions. Ruth says, "I found that the Musashi brand is like that too. Yeah, cool. Musashi is a pretty well-known Australian. Are they Australian? Anyway, it's a well-known brand in Australia. So yeah, Vicky, the micronized is surely different and a lot better." Well, so I'm finding the bulk nutrients one is getting a little grainy, not quite dissolving completely. Okay, so from memory, I think bulk nutrients is nearly all the brands are micronized now. It could be that once a little bit of moisture gets in the bag, which is why they have the silica or whatever it's called in there to try to suck the moisture out, because it will get a bit clumpy and a bit grainy. So if that has happened, that could be a reason why it's not dissolving enough. Or, Vic, it might be that you are having more creatine with the same amount of water, okay? More creatine with the same amount of water. And for that reason, it's not dissolving. So you just need to increase the amount of water that you drink. Does that make sense? Jace, can you put that in the group, please, about Creapure? Yep. Can you remind me, and I'll try to do that. Yep, for sure. It's not too complicated at all. I find that it dissolves better in hot water, but I still get a grainy mouthful at the end of my drink. Yeah, well, that's still going to happen with mine's micronized, Vic. It's still going to happen with that because it's almost like it doesn't completely dissolve. It just suspends in the water whilst it's stirred. And then if you let it settle, it'll all sink to the bottom. So it doesn't permanently mist into the water, if that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so we're going to get over to the boys. We've got any questions? Craigie says, "I bought a Cryogen shoulder press. Have been using shoulder after workouts. Works a gem. Love it." Okay, so Beck says, "What's the best substitute for kneeling cable ab crunch? I can't kneel at the moment, and I seem to change which core exercises I substitute with every week." Okay, so when it comes to ab work, generally there's 3 different types of ab positions that you can get into. You can have, let's just pretend we're sitting upright. We can have one where we have the abs, the top of the abs coming down, so the body's coming down. We can have one where the legs are coming up, or we can have one where the abs are just contracting. Okay, so they're in a still contraction. So there's 3 different types. So in your case, my favorite exercise for training abs, and I train abs like once every 3 weeks, to be honest, because I don't want big bulky abs. I want lean abs, which is more about the fat on top, Beck. Okay, so if you want to try to get to a point where you can see some definition, it's less about the ab work that you do and more about the diet that you obey, so you can get rid of that superficial layer of fat on top, right? But my favorite ab exercise is the decline sit-up. That's where you sit on the decline machine, so your legs are up, and then that really gets you to open up your abs. I love that exercise personally. Okay, guys, if you got any more questions, you can whack them in the comments. I'm going to get over here and answer a couple of other questions. All right, so what do we got here? So does running negate any work you do on your legs? Pete, that's a good question. So I think here's the way you want to think about it. When the body changes, the body is responding to the signals that you're giving it. Okay? The body is responding to the signals that you're giving it. So if the predominant signal is a gym session, so you're doing mostly weight training, which is what I do, if the predominant signal that your body is getting is resistance training 3 or 4 times a week, say, high protein diet, which is the building blocks of muscle, the predominant signal that your body is responding to is the signal to build muscle. Yep. Now, whether you're a man or a woman, that doesn't mean that you're going to all of a sudden get bulky. It's nearly impossible. But it's responding to the predominant signal, Pete. Now, in the converse, if the predominant signal that your body is getting based on the work that you're doing is a lot of running with a lot of heart rate and a lot of endurance style training, then the predominant signal is a cardiovascular adaptation. So with that in mind, would it be beneficial to have really bulky, heavy legs if the predominant signal is a cardiovascular adaptation? Running. Do you see any African runners with massive quads? Never. Do you see 100-meter sprinters with massive quads? Always. Why? Because the predominant signal is power off the spot, not long distance running. So the answer to your question, Pete, is it depends on how much running you're actually doing. If you're doing, like a couple of, 5-kilometer runs a week, that's not going to be an issue as long as your calories are high enough. But if you're running like for a marathon training type thing, then yeah, it's going to be pretty hard for you to send the predominant signal of building quads when actually you're doing a lot of cardio. So it just depends on the level to which is the predominant signal or not. Hopefully that makes sense, brother. Is L-carnitine good for fat burn? It's not a supplement that I recommend, Deej. So yeah, that's the short answer, is it, mate? I don't really support L-carnitine at all. Imad says, the cottage cheese, Greek yogurt, chicken, and protein powders is getting boring. What about weekends when you are out and about with the kids? How to stay within calories and protein goals? Good question, Imad. Okay, so yeah, this is the thing. For a lot of people, they do get bored eating health foods, so to speak. So one of the ways that you can control the total amount of calories and protein that you're eating is to look at potentially doing some fasting or reducing the size or the portion of the meals that you don't want to waste your calories on. So let me give you an example, Imad. So let's say you're getting to the weekend, right? And you want to go out and enjoy. Okay, I'm going to give my example. Let's say I want to go out for lunch with my wife and kids, and we do this frequently, right? Well, what I'm going to do is either have no breakfast or I'm going to have a protein shake so that I'm keeping my calories for that meal between 100 and 200 calories. What this is going to mean is that because I've saved here, I can use the calories here. Does that make sense? I can save here and I can use the calories here. So that's from a calorie perspective. Then the question becomes, okay, well, what types of food do you eat when you go out, Imad? So me personally, I would, as an example, I would just never buy deep fried fish. I would never buy deep fried anything. I would never personally buy a pizza. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying I just wouldn't do that because to me, I don't get enough value out of eating those foods, even if it's with the kids. One thing that we've been doing constantly is eating like a massive sushi lunch, right? My kids are very worldly, so they love sushi. They'll sit down and we will literally have $150 of sushi at a meal, right? And that's what we do. That doesn't mean it doesn't contain any calories, but if you're eating a shit ton of sashimi, it's going to contain some really good healthy fats, firstly, which is great for the kids. But then secondly, it contains a lot of protein for a moderate amount of calories. So there is a timing thing, Pete, Imad. Okay, so a timing thing. There is a quality thing because there's a big difference between eating out and going absolutely fucking ham on something that's really heavy in calories. Does that make sense? So for me, man, think about making the meals around the one you're eating out lower in calories so that you spare your calories for later on. Think about the quality of the food when you eat out. Are you going to McDonald's or are you going to a sushi restaurant, as an example? And then finally, it's like, what are you having with the indulgence? So what most people do is they double up the indulgence. So they have the food, but then they have the alcohol or the soft drinks. And then it goes from being like a 500, 600, 700 calorie meal, maybe a bit more, to like double that because we haven't factored in all the fluids that we're having with it. Does that make sense? So in other words, choose your one indulgence and that's it. Don't double up on your indulgence. Hopefully that answers the question, Imad. Now, Vicky, I saw that you asked the question just before. No worries, Pete. I saw you ask the question before around why am I saying 100 instead of 150 or 60? The answer is, Vicky, for the average person that is not in Better Body Academy and has no guidance around getting to 150 or 160 grams of protein, it's just really hard to do without guidance. So basically what I'm doing, Vicky, it's a good call out. What I'm doing is saying what is a more digestible message for most people. Now, I did a kickoff call this morning with our new clients. And I said, now that you're starting to use MyFitnessPal a little bit, how much protein do you think you were eating before you started in Better Body Academy? And the answer was 40 or 50 grams of protein. And so if you're eating 40 or 50 grams of protein, and then we tell you to go to 140 or 150, that's just fucking without any guidance. If you can just get it over 100 as a woman, that's your start point. Make sense? Hopefully that clarifies it, Vix. Really good question, by the way. Guys, I'm nearly done. So if you've got any questions, please just whack them in. I like it. Love that you can relate. Imad, you know what, dude? Because here's the reason. Because I've got 2 kids and they're 5 and 3. And all we do in our program is teach people what we do. So if you're sick of these fucking guys on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook that are just like chicken and broccoli. Look, hey, I love chicken and broccoli. Don't get me wrong. I love chicken and broccoli. But I also like having the flexibility to do what I want when I want. And I'm not going to tell my kid that he can't have an ice cream or she can't have a fucking, I don't know, whatever it is that we're eating. That you've got to be able to have that flexibility, right? It's about taking your kids along on the journey with you. Not one thing that always like upsets me a little bit is, and we see it in our group sometimes, is, check this out, is when someone like a man or a woman says, I did really, really well yesterday. My whole family went to McDonald's and I just ate the salad. It's like, yes, I like that you stuck with it, but at the same account, like take your family along on the ride with you. Learn how to do it for yourself first, then take them on the ride and be proud rather than you were the one that didn't eat it, you were the one that changed your family. Like that's for me is the relatable part. Why is it chicken and broccoli? Mel, I don't know. Like everyone picks on chicken and broccoli. And again, I love chicken and broccoli, but not for every meal, right? It does get boring. Winnie says, in a calorie deficit, high protein, weight training, average 7,000 steps a day, but weight fluctuating and dropping slowly. Any tips? Well, are you trying to drop your weight? If you're trying to drop your weight, then that's good. Weight fluctuating and dropping slowly. Your weight will fluctuate, Winnie. That's what happens. The thought, when you've seen this, if I could show you all of our clients' successful client weight loss, it doesn't go like this, like in this one straight line. It typically goes like up, down, 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 up, like it's up, down, and then the trajectory is down slowly, right? And that's because of many different things. But when you weigh yourself on the scales, you're not just weighing your self-esteem and you're not just weighing fat, you're weighing muscle and water, you're weighing blood, you're weighing everything. So just because you put on a little bit of weight, that might just because you had a hard training session. It might be because you ate some carbohydrates last night, so you're retaining a little bit of water. There are many reasons why your weight might go up that has nothing to do with you gaining weight or doing something wrong. Does that make sense, Winnie? Hopefully it does. Okay, guys. Yes, building muscle and strength. Yeah, exactly. So you've got to get clear in what you're trying to achieve. What is your goal? Are you wanting to lose weight? Are you wanting to build muscle? Like, where are you trying to get to? And that's the start point. I think a lot of people just start, but they're not really sure what they're trying to achieve in the first place. And they get sort of 5 to 10 weeks into it and they're confused. Yeah. All right, guys. So if there's not any other questions, I'm going to go over to Lisa. Morning, Jace. Quick question. If I hit my protein goal for the day and I have calories left over and I'm not hungry, do I need to eat the rest of the calories when on a deficit? So great question, Lisa. This is probably the most common question that we get, right? The most common question we get. And I think rooted in this is the long-term yo-yo dieting model, right? So we kind of like, it's almost like you want permission to cut your calories quicker, almost, right? And the reality is it an issue? Do you have to stuff yourself at the end of the day? No. But if it becomes a pattern, Elisa, where you're constantly getting to the end of the day and you're at 1,200 calories and you're making this kind of subconscious judgment in your mind that 1,200 is better than 1,500 is better than 2,000, and so cutting's a really, really good thing all the time, then you kind of end up pigeonholing yourself into this idea that, oh, now my calories target's 1,200 and now it's 1,000. And then it becomes like, and then you're starting to run into problems with you're really tired and really, really fatigued and you're really, do you know what I mean? So, on an individual day, it's not an issue, but I wouldn't rush to cutting calories really, really quickly. That's not something that I would suggest is a good idea. Okay. Hopefully that answers your question, mate. Yeah. Okay, guys. Well, I think that's a wrap for today. Thanks for everyone for coming into this. I hope it's been helpful. We do this at the same time every week. Now, take note that it did go back back, forward, whichever one you want to call it, due to Australian daylight savings. So it will now be at 7 a.m. Sydney time, 6 a.m. Brisbane time every Tuesday for you guys. These bloody time zones, because we're a global transformation business, it's really freaking hard to keep across all of them all at the same time. But hopefully this has been helpful, guys. If you want to ask anything, just bang it through and we'll answer those questions additionally. All right, guys.